Hello, everyone. Welcome to this incredible conversation we're about to have with the wonderful Simone Bell. Simone, you are so welcome. I'm very grateful for you taking the time to have this conversation with me and for your patience in finally getting us live.
No problem, Laura. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to our talk.
Yes. So, today we really are going to talk around the difference between being not racist and then anti-racism and just kind of the nuances and why it's actually important, kind of enlighten everything that's happening around Black Lives Matters and, obviously all the kind of the protests and the big movement that we're witnessing kind of play out at the moment. But before we get stuck in, do you want to just say hello, maybe introduce yourself a little bit?
Of course, yeah. So, hi to everyone watching, listening. I'm Simone Bell. I am a success coach and I work with women who have a business idea but feel stuck in a job. I'm an award-winning speaker as well. Also have an events background, so I have an events companies, and I also recently moved into producing resources for children. So, yeah, bit of an entrepreneur, you could say.
Slight entrepreneurial streak, fair to say that exactly. Well, for those of you listening, please let us know if you are watching live. Let us know hello. Or if you're catching this on replay, definitely let us know that too by just saying #replay. Simple and straightforward.
Yes.
So, big topic to cover. I'm sure we could talk about this for days, but kind of, let's touch on the kind of the big points right now. I think there's a lot of confusion probably still around the difference between people saying, but I'm not racist, and then anti-racist. So do you want to kind of give us your thoughts on that, your views?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I'm always very sure to say that I do not sit here and speak for the whole of the Black community as though I represent a whole race, because I think sometimes that's another part of the confusion that speak to a Black person, they represent a race. Whereas you speak to a white person, they're taken as an individual. You speak to a Black person, especially now in light of everything that's happened, it's almost like you represent the race. I don't do that. I come and speak as a Black woman and my experiences. But in saying that, I'm sure what I would talk about that a lot of Black people will resonate. So I'm always very sure to say that. When we look at, the difference between non-racism, anti-racism, I think the first thing around that is people saying, oh, well, I'm not racist. And possibly because they don't use racial slurs. They won't refer to someone as the N-word or something like that. And that's good. But I would say then, but what about those sort of stereotypes that you may have? The unconscious or sometimes conscious biases that you have, the microaggressions, where are you from? No, but where are you really from? Things like that. Those biases, looking at someone a little bit strange if they're in a certain area or walking into a room. And so it's those sort of things. So when you look at, well, I'm not racist, you have to really take a bit of an inward look and say, okay, but do I have some prejudice? Some, like I said, stereotypes, those microaggressions, those little things that I think. And sometimes it is so unconscious, because what we don't realize is this thing is so much bigger and deeper and comes from way back, hundreds and hundreds of years of systemic racism and conditioning. When I think about it, and people say things like, well, we don't have an issue in the UK. Well, we do. when we look at that, and think about the fact that England, slavery was very big in England. There was enslaving Black people. That was big in England. And although when slavery was legally abolished, you have to understand that the mindset and the conditioning was still there. So the stereotypes around Black people. And so this has been going on. So this is a mindset thing. And that's why I will say that things aren't going to change overnight, because this is years and years and years of conditioning, of mindset that needs to change, and barriers that need to be broken down. So that's the first part of it. But thinking about that sort of non-racism, when I think about the difference between non-racism and anti-racism, it's really the difference between being passive and being active, basically. So
Yeah.
Sorry, Laura.
No, I was just, because you know what, you've already covered so much. I just want to, pick apart a few little bits that maybe people might have even overlooked when you talk about, I'm not racist, as in it's a passive way of being, of like, I don't say certain words or use racial slurs, but I go about my everyday life. And the reality that, and I always try and come back to this from like my own experience, maybe just as a woman in a man's world within the finance world, where I've heard that being said before, like, but I'm not sexist and I have no problem with women in the workplace. But you're saying, but what are you doing to actively support that? Because you know there's discrimination there. So that's kind of how I would try and understand, this discussion around race a bit better, to be like, well, it's fine to say you're not racist, but there's discrimination there. You know that when you look at that Jane Elliott experiment, when she said, well, who here would want to trade places with a black person, and no one in the room put their hand up. It's evident that people know that there's an issue. So we can pretend and be blind to it, but by just saying, oh, I don't say anything bad, oh, I have black people or black friends, I have black people in my family, that might make you feel good. But if you know there's an issue and you're not doing anything about it, then that's a different discussion that we need to have, which I think was kind of what you were going to start talking about, the more active approach of being anti-racist, right?
Exactly. And that's it. I mean, I have to pick on that point because it's something that I must say really irritates me, if I can say that.
Go for it.
I can't be racist because I have black friends. I can't be racist because I have black family members. You can. You really can.
Yeah.
Like, you can be married to a black person, you can have black children, you could have black friends, you can have a black neighbor. That doesn't mean that you're not racist, because like I said, it's those microaggressions, it's the little things that you might say, the way you might think. And so we've really got to, I think all of us have to start, and if I'm being honest, white people have to start from a place of honesty, transparency. No one's asking, I'm sure, I'm certainly not, and I'm sure many black people will say, no one is asking anyone to apologize for being white. Like, I'm seeing a lot of, rightly so, outrage at what's happened from all races. The injustice that takes place. It's not about apologizing for being white. That's not it. It's just being actively anti-racist, being an ally. And that starts from a place of being honest and learning, speaking out. I would say to people, and, I know a lot of white people are maybe afraid of getting it wrong. This is something that's been said, saying the wrong thing. But first, before even that, where do you stand on racism? Do you think it's wrong? That's a good starting point. I don't think there has to be a lot of education around saying that racism is wrong. That there should be a level playing field. That justice, we should pursue justice where there is injustice and oppression. So that's the starting point. And then from there, educate yourself. There are so many books. There's Google. There has to be honesty, and there has to be accountability as well. It's not just the job of your black friend to teach you and tell you what's wrong with racism and things like that. There has to be an onus on our white friends as well to do their part by learning, educating themselves, asking the hard questions. I saw a great, and I saw it on your wall. Somebody sent it to me, but I saw it on your wall, Laura. I think someone tagged you in that sort of spectrum of how to be anti-racist.
I actually have it here because I wanted to talk to you about it. But I really want to come back to that point, because I think this is such an interesting one that you make, and I think it would be surprising for some people when you say, you know what, you can be married to a black man or a black woman, but you can still be racist. So that may not, like, when I'm hearing that intuitively, I'm like, but how is that so? So I'd love to kind of get a little bit more of your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, because the thing about that is, you may love the person, but you're seeing that person, but you still have certain feelings around other black people or around another race. That's where it comes from. Like I said, it's those prejudices, it's those. So a lot of people will say then, okay, well, I don't see color. I don't see color. I'm colorblind. No, you're not colorblind. You do see color. We all see color. Laura, I can see that you're a white woman. You can see that I'm a black woman.
Yeah, I sure can.
You're right. There is nothing wrong with that. I think, celebrate our differences.
Yeah.
We can get along. We see color. And when you say that you don't see color, of course, you're saying that you don't see me, which is very odd. But also, I would question that. Okay, if you don't see color, would you go and live in a street where you are a minority as a white person? Would you feel comfortable living on a street where you are in a minority and a majority of Black people? Would you send your child to a school that has majority of Black people? Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just asking those questions. And if you were like, okay, then you do see color. And so to say that you don't, I think is very, people, I know why people are saying it, because they want to, well, I don't see color, I love everybody. Great, you do, good. But let's not say you don't see color.
I do find this one kind of humorous in a way, I'll be honest, when people say, I don't see color. And I'm like, why? Because I think even admitting to the fact I don't see color, you're admitting to the fact that there's a race issue, right? Because why would, like, I'd never say I don't see gender.
That's it.
Right? Like, or I don't see disability. Like, if I saw someone in a wheelchair, I'd see they're in a wheelchair and maybe want to see if I can help, or, do you want me to open the door for you? Like, I'm not going to pretend I'm blind to that. Exactly. So I don't know why we would say it about race.
Because sometimes that comes back then to feeling comfortable being passive. So if I don't see color, I don't have to admit that there's a race issue, that there is injustice, and so I don't have to do anything about it. And I think
then maybe I can, maybe I can justify the fact I haven't done anything about it. And then I'm okay with that then. Oh, I don't see color though, so I don't need to speak up about it.
That's it. That's exactly. And it's funny that it's only really, and I think you hit the nail on the head, it's only when we're talking about race that people say that I don't see color. And let's see color, and because when we see color, we see everything that's happening. And then we can start making some changes. We're not all going to get a world stage. We're not all going to be able to stand in front of prime ministers and presidents, but we can all do something where we are. And that's the first part of when like I said, starting with about how to be anti-racist, about honesty, about educating yourself, and then doing what you can where you are. So because if we all start making little changes where we are, that starts a movement. Little by little, we build our power, as the saying, right? So we can all start doing that. Do you call out your friends when they make snide racial jokes? Comments? Do you call that out? Do you see injustice in the workplace, and do you call that out? Because it starts from where you are. What can you do where you are? So that's why it's not enough just to say I'm not racist.
I couldn't agree more with that, because it's not that you need to have, as you said, this big global platform, but it's like we all have a circle of influence. We all have someone that we're influencing in our life, whether that be in the workplace, in our family homes, communities, whatever that is. And from that place, you can make an impact. Even think back to when I worked in corporate, and it's like we all have influence over resourcing decisions. So who are we staffing on the high profile engagements? That's the point in which you have to make a conscious decision. And are you aware of certain discriminations that might be happening, or certain inequalities that might be coming up? And are you going to be taking an active role in making sure that doesn't exist while you're there, or while you have your say or influence? It doesn't have to be these big milestone events, but it can happen. From my experience, it can happen in the small moments, where you just be aware. And also, I have to come back to this thing again around not seeing race, right, or not seeing color, because when Barack Obama got elected, right, it was like we had I say we as if I'm American, but there was the first Black woman first lady, right, Michelle Obama, like amazing. And that's something to be celebrated. So imagine then saying, oh, I don't see color.
Yeah.
We would never say that. It was a moment of celebration to say, look at the progress made.
Yeah, exactly. The first Black president, the first Black first lady, first Black family in the White House. Exactly. Yeah. That is something to be celebrated. But I really do. For some people, it's said with the best of intentions. I don't see color. It's said with the best of intentions, but I would say so it's not the best thing to say. But for some people, it's a cop-out. If I say I don't see color, I don't have to acknowledge that there is inequality, that there's an issue. I don't have to do anything about it. And so I will be comfortable, because, and that comes back to white privilege that I know a lot of people struggle with. But white privilege is real and white privilege exists. Now, I think there has been so much explanation of what that means that if you still are querying it, I'm like, are you being willingly ignorant now? But, you know, just because for the sake of this conversation, we can talk about it. But white privilege, and what I find interesting is that it was actually a white man that first coined that phrase, white privilege. I would really encourage everybody to read. There are many books, but there's a book called Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. It's a really interesting, powerful book, and I would encourage anybody to read it. And even she refers to explains more about what white privilege is there. Because I know when that is said, you know, there are many white people who say, well, I'm not privileged. I had a hard upbringing. I don't come from a privileged background. When we say white privilege, it's not that you've never experienced struggles, but I'm sure that your race has never been a struggle for you. You've never been marginalized because of your race. You've never had to worry about, you know, your name, writing your name on a CV, and because it doesn't sound English, that you're worrying about whether you're going to be selected for an interview. You know, that's what we're talking about. Privilege. Even in terms of the anti-racism is recognizing the white allies, recognizing that you have a privilege, and accept, you know, but using that privilege for good, and being an ally and calling out racism and not ignoring it, like we said about not ignoring race. And what can you do? What can we do together in this fight against racism and injustice? I always say, and many people say, it's not a black versus white issue. It's really not. It's everybody against racism.
Yes. Like so much so, right? Because there's so many points now. Yes, white people are privileged because we grow up in a society which has been set up for the success of white people predominantly, right? That is how the structures have been set up because they've been created by white people, you know, majority speaking. So I think it's important that we recognize that it's not to take away from the pain or struggle that any person has gone through, but it's just saying, you know, and this is what I had wrote about earlier this week was, you know, even myself as an Irish woman coming to the UK, like I've had my own wonderful experiences in the corporate world with some very lovely male colleagues having fun, you know, and all sorts of different things around being sexualized by some very wonderful male leaders and, you know, all that, whatever, right? And we all have our own experiences. But the point of it was, but I've never worried about my success. I've never felt threatened or under attack because of the color of my skin. Right?
Exactly.
That's never come up as an issue for me. And so, yes, we all have our challenges, but it's when you're also consciously aware of the fact that my skin color is being a factor in someone else's determination of, you know, results or my future if you're in a career kind of situation.
Yeah.
So that's a privilege.
Yeah, that's it. And, you know, there are things said sometimes that I think are a lot of the time used to try and silence Black people, maybe because it makes people feel uncomfortable. It'd be like, you know, stop playing the race card, being a victim. It's not about playing a race card or being a victim. It's understanding, and you said it there, Laura, that a system that has been set up for the advancement and success of white people and not Black people. This is the thing that there was, and this book, I know I keep referring to it, but I would encourage Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. Don't be put off by the title. Anybody listening,
no, I love it.
Get the book and read it. Educate. It's such an educational book. And the author speaks in there about it. I think it was in 2014. There was a survey done, I think, by The Guardian, and they saw a stark rise in the amount of people openly admitting that they were racist, basically, that their own racism. And they saw the biggest rise in white professional males aged, I think, between 34 and 60 odd. 64, I can't remember the exact. So you look at that, white professional males, that age group, that's going to be, if we're just generalizing here, yeah, but CEOs, that's going to be doctors, that's going to be people in positions of influence and power. So if they have racist views, then how are we then surprised when we said the system was set up for the success of white people and not black people or other races?
Yeah.
Just that simple, if we look at it like that. And so
yeah.
It's not about playing a race card or victimhood. We just understand that this fight that we have on our hands in the UK.
But it's not about, how can it be about playing a race card if there is discrimination about race? Like, it's not a logical debate to have. Don't play the race card. Yeah, but I'm being discriminated against because of my race in this situation. So actually, it's not about playing any card. It's just highlighting that inequality, right?
Exactly. But you're speaking logically, though. And this is why. And this is why I say I think sometimes it's a cop out. I think people say certain things because to avoid uncomfortable situations. And that's why that spectrum that we referred to earlier, where it's that spectrum of moving from anti-racist moving from non-racist, I guess, or to actively become anti-racist. And it was a fear zone, a learning zone, and a growth zone. And in the fear zone, it's like, I don't ask difficult questions. I only stick with people that look like me. Then it was the learning zone, but I think asking questions and things. And then it was the growth zone about being active in the fight against racism, looking at policies and procedures and things like that. And it's about where we are on that spectrum. And like I said, not apologizing for being white or anything like that. If you've made mistakes in the past, that's what it is. But from, the starting point is what do you feel about racism? Is it wrong? Yes, if you accept it's wrong, what can you do in your circle and sphere of influence to help in this fight? Because I said, I'm trying to recap because obviously we lost it, but I said some of us aren't going to get a major platform. We're not going to be speaking in front of presidents and prime ministers, but we can do something where we are. It starts in our homes. I mean, our children. I had a forum last week, Laura. It's called Simone Space. It's just something that I've started. And it's basically comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it's all about having these sort of uncomfortable conversations. And last week it was we'll have 3 speakers, and it was one of the topics was this, about non-racist versus anti-racist, how to discuss race in the workplace, and also what to talk to children about race and what to say. And a great friend of mine, Aisha Thomas, she's an assistant principal in a city school in Bristol, and she championed for equality, etc. And she spoke about the fact about how young children are when they start really recognizing race and seeing differences. Yeah. It's powerful, and so it's really important then that even what we say in our homes, how we refer to other people, that sort of thing, because our children are then recognizing differences. And so, but how do we want our children to grow up? How do we want them to think? Because we know that it's learned behavior. It's so a lot of racism spectrum, because like I said, the conditioning, and a lot of it is mindset. And there's a lot of undoing, basically. I guess what I'm trying to say, there's a lot of undoing that needs to happen. But even with the next generation, then let's not make them have that same mindset, that destructive and toxic mindset that looks down on others, that stereotypes, that has these biases.
100%. Yeah, I think it's such a great point that you bring up too. There's an experiment called the doll experiment. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes.
And so for anyone who hasn't, and thank you, I know we have Natasha, Angie, and Astrid join live, so thank you for being here watching this with us. But it was this great experiment, and please add to it as well, but they were showing like these dolls to really young kids, like they must be like 5 or 6, and asking like which was most intelligent, which was prettier, which was smarter, which is the good doll, which is the bad doll. And for me, it was so shocking just to see how early their views had been shaped around race, even if they didn't know why. But they just knew, but they didn't know why.
Well, and that's it. Imagine that thinking that, and that's Black children who actually think that Black is ugly and Black is bad, you know, and like I said, heartbreaking. And like you said, they don't know why, but they're seeing that differences. But when you look at media, I mean, I'm thankful, thank God, now that there's a long way to go, but there's some representation on TV now, and cartoons that show Black people. But when you look at maybe when I was growing up, and yourself, Laura, and think about how were Black people depicted on TV, I mean, and that's going way back, the depiction, criminals, rapists, this, that, bad. So everything Black was bad and everything white was good and savior, etc. And so much conditioning, you know. Another subject, I mean, I'm a Christian, and even the sort of the depiction of Jesus and the people in the Bible and all of that. I mean, that's a whole nother topic, okay? But all of this comes into it. And you think about it, how many Black superheroes did you see when you were growing up?
Yeah.
You know,
all I saw was Barbies.
This is it.
I mean, which is not exactly the best role model for a woman either.
Exactly. And it's all of this conditioning and media portrayals when a Black person does something versus a white person does something. The difference in the portrayal, the difference in the wording. You know, this isn't about victimhood. This is just reality. And this is what we're dealing with.
And the challenge with media is that it's so daily in your face and it's all consuming, is that we don't even realize what we're being programmed to think. And I think this is the part of our mindset. It's like, you know, you can say I'm not racist, but actually what you mentioned earlier about really self-reflecting, because you could have unconscious beliefs, negative beliefs around Black people, and never have really checked yourself or challenged yourself around it. But if you've grown up and your only time that you've seen Black people is, you know, I think back to my time in Ireland, we're like on Oxfam boxes. There were no Black people that lived in Cork, but so when I thought of Black people, they were on the Oxfam boxes. Or if you saw media on TV, it was, you know, drug dealers or criminals.
Exactly.
Right. So what kind of view of the world are you shaping then?
Well, exactly. And that's another thing about the portrayal of Africa in the continent. It's this portrayal that it's all poverty, and that is so far from the truth. I mean, another thing that I think is important to say is that Black people's history did not start at slavery. It really did not.
I mean, it's
And yet, that's what's
I should say more words than yes, but it's insane that's where I mean, obviously understandably such a focus, but like as if there was no success or prosperity around Black history. It was always just in that period of slavery. And it's like no, like Africa is like, there's so much history.
Rich in history. And that's what I'm saying. It's about education. It's really about education on all parts. And you think even for Black children, having to educate because they're in a society that does not teach them that, you know, as Black parents and family, we have to do the teaching and the debate. But it's not just, it shouldn't be just us. I mean, there's a whole cultural history that is missing in the history books in England, because that's what we're talking about, you know. And there's just so much. I mean, I'm from Bristol originally. I live in the Midlands now. I'm in Bristol, so I grew up walking past the statue of Colston, and the Colston Hall, which is a music venue. There's Colston School. There are road names that are very controversial in Bristol, and just grew up around that. And
so tell me what Colston is, because there may be some people like myself who don't know that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So Colston basically was a slave owner, and
okay.
The statue,
is this the one that got pulled down?
Exactly, that got pulled down 2 weeks ago now at the protest. So and the argument's been, well, it's part of history, and he gave so much money and things like that. Well, the outrage at the fact that statue has been pulled down, and yet so little outrage of what that statue represents.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many examples, and I'm not going to say on here, but there are so many things. I'd say, would you put up a statue of that person? Would you put, and just because they gave money, but they have done some hideous things, some abhorrent things, would you want to have their statue? But because it was around slavery and impacted, you know, and this Black people should just get over it. It's so dismissive, it's so wrong, but it's systemic. It's a mindset and it's conditioning, and so it's such a big fight. And so that's why it's not just on the shoulders of Black people to be in this fight. If you are a white person or any other race and you're saying racism is wrong, what are you actively doing in your sphere of influence to change that and to make changes?
Yeah. And I think, you know, when people used to be saying, I don't know what to say, it just comes back to, what are your values? Like, I believe at my core of equality. I can't stand for equality if I just believe in equality for white people.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not that hard to figure out where you stand on things and what you want to use your voice for, and, you know, how you want to make a change. Doesn't mean people have to come on and do Facebook Lives every day, but, you know, even in your own life, if it's in private, like, you can just decide, you know what, maybe I haven't really thought about racism before, you know, it hasn't been a prevalent part of my life, but this is maybe being my wake-up call to be more actively aware, you know. And I think it's that switch of awareness in people now to be like, wake up. You know, I had that wake up myself when I was running women's network events back at my previous firm, and I can't even remember what it was, but I remember looking around and there was just like a lot of white people, a lot of white women. And I think there was, I don't know who it was, but I ended up speaking with this Black woman who had come to it. And anyway, out of that conversation, I ended up joining the Black network, because I had this dawning moment of, you know what, men are coming to this event and feeling a bit unsure of what to say and a bit out of place. And I said, they can't really understand what we're going through. So unless you can help them understand, or they can educate themselves, and they can't really be part of the solution until they really understand the challenges. And I realized I'm the same. I can't really help create, you know, race equality if I don't know what the challenges are.
Right. That's
right. Because how can you stand up for something if you're naive or blind to the challenges that exist? So,
well, that's it. You know, and I know there are many white people that will feel uncomfortable being around a lot of Black people, and yet Black people have had to get used to being the minority in a room for many years. I mean,
but that's it.
Exactly. I mean, I don't like the term ethnic minority, if I'm honest. It's not about, you know, it just happens to be that there are a lot of Black people in England. So even that in itself, it's just that there are a lot. But in terms of, if we're just talking about, if walking into a room, into a workplace that's predominantly white, and you are the only Black person, by virtue of that, you're a minority at that point. You're in a minority.
100%.
So as
it doesn't feel good.
Right. So, but white struggle with the concept of walking into a room, maybe full of Black people, some white people, I shouldn't say, or some white people. Yeah. And this is what I'm saying when it comes back to, then you can't say you don't see color. That's a perfect example of where you see color.
Yeah. Well, we don't have a colorless network, right? We have the Black network for a reason, right? But I remember going to that event and I was the only white person, and that actually was a thought that went through my head of, you know what, this is probably the first time I'd walked into a room where I was the only white person. You know, I grew up in Ireland, so that's not too surprising. And I pretty much traveled the Med growing up, right? So not exactly that too exotic. And it was just such a wake-up call to be like, well, this is probably what, you know, a few of my colleagues experience daily. Like, I used to find it challenging being the only woman walking into a room of all men, but race wasn't an issue for me. So I got, you know, imagine being a Black woman walking in and you're the only woman, plus you're the only Black person in that room as well. Yeah. Because I know how it made me feel. So
yeah,
that's like an extra layer on top.
Yeah.
So numbers matter. Like, you know, equality, it matters, and it's not just the big things. It's the small moments too. And I mean, I'm so glad we're having this conversation, but it's so many times I think about it, it just, like, logic just loses me on this one, because we're talking about a pigment in our skin, right? Where, like, suntan comes and every white person is out trying to tan to increase the level of pigment in their skin, or buying fake tan to make themselves darker. But yeah, racism exists because of skin color. Like, the premise of it, I mean, that's such a, I don't know, it's not exactly the most intellectual debate about it, but just at the very basis of it, like,
yeah,
it's pigment.
But like I said, it's conditioning. It's a lot of conditioning, years and years of superiority, a complex that white is better, white is more superior. You know, going in and thinking about how people were enslaved and going in and taking people, and then and that superiority and convincing Black people that they were inferior. And so that's gone on, and that conditioning, like I said earlier, though slavery was legally abolished, but that years of conditioning, and so that's went on for many years afterwards. The out and out racism on TV shows, some that won't be shown, can't be shown now. In the 70s, 80s, my mum and parents tell me about what they had to put up with. You know, riots in the 80s, the 90s, recently, the Windrush scandal. There is so much. And so I struggle when people say that we have no issues in the UK. It's silly to say that. And are you saying that again because it makes you feel uncomfortable? And so by saying that, you don't have to address it. So it's a massive issue, Laura. I mean, you know, we talk about it. I'm very much an action person, you know, like that's why I keep harping on and banging on about doing something where you are. I'm doing something where I am, you are, Laura, and those listening, just do something where you are, call it out, speak out against it. It's just what you might think is really small, but actually it's to help you challenge that person that made that remark. You know, that's a step in the right direction. It might then cause them to think about, oh, okay, you know, their stereotypes, their bias. And you never know what it can achieve, but it starts from doing something, because we can just keep having conversations and keep talking or keep saying, oh, I'm learning, I'm silent because I'm learning. But in that time, there's so much going on. Let's start taking action.
So is there anything else that you'd like to leave? You know, I know we have a couple of people tuning in live today.
Hi, everyone.
Let's talk to the white people here listening. Like, is there anything, you know, from your perspective, you're like, you know, for just once, I would like if you could, whatever. I don't know, is there something else beyond speaking up and having that awareness? And if there's not, that's cool too, but just to open it up in case there is.
Honestly, I'm not even sure if there is. Like I said, you know, don't just think that it's the job of the Black community to fight this. Don't think it's just the job of your Black friend to tell you how bad it is. And then, you know, this almost guilt around, oh, being white, that's not helpful. It's just a case of educate yourself, learn. Like I said, there are so many books, there are TV. Yes, ask questions, but let's move from the place of passiveness to a place of activity and action. You know, so that's all I'd really say, to be honest, and keep talking. I mean, I think that it's important for us all to keep talking. I love that. If anything, I don't even want to say good because that's the wrong word, but if anything came out of George Floyd's murder, was that it's got the conversation going, and we have been fighting, we've been protesting, we've been shouting for years. This feels slightly different, but there's still a ways to go. And I know that because you just have to scroll down Facebook and see some of the racist comments and things that I said. So and we're ending, so we're not even going to go down that road, Laura, but you know what I mean.
You know, I just have to say this point though, because when this conversation started happening, my first thing was, you know what, maybe I'm not as actively anti-racist as I would like to be if I was more thoughtful about it. And that was kind of where I was coming from. But honestly, and this is maybe a place of complete naivety, when I came on social media and actually saw people being racist, like straight out with their comments, I was genuinely shocked. I was like, people actually think this way? Like, I thought people were just ignorant but just, so that really was what was probably the most eye-opening thing for me.
It's exposed a lot. It has really exposed a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe that's good. In that, you know, these could be people I'm sat next to, and I need to know how you think. So maybe that's good, if you're a lack of a better word. But yeah, I completely agree with it. It exposed so much, but the conversation is happening, and we need to keep finding. This is not just a social media hashtag. It's not just a win. This has to keep going until some really real positive changes are made. And one thing I'll also say is that it wasn't just, this is the thing, it isn't just about George Floyd. It was almost, for a lack of a better terminology, George Floyd was the straw that broke the camel's back. That said, enough is enough. Like, when is enough of Black people being treated like this? You know, and people bringing up George Floyd's past, and he was a criminal. I don't care what he was. He did not deserve to die, be murdered.
Yeah.
That you know, when we look at statistics about the deaths and police brutality and just job opportunities, there is so much statistical evidence to show the inequality. And so another thing, and I'm really just rushing because I know you want,
No, I'm not rushing you at all, because you don't even have to look at statistics. Just look at the leadership in the country, or look at the leadership of any big firm. Right? You don't need statistics and research to show you what your eyes can show you.
Exactly. What was the name of that guy? He was asked the question on the news: how many Black representatives are in the current cabinet? Oh, well, we have diversity of thought. Well, that says it all. How many Black people do you have in the current cabinet? Well, this is the most diverse.
Just because you have people from like Oxford and Cambridge doesn't mean you have a diversity of thought.
Oh, what even is that? What even is that? So I'm saying there's just so much. And when we start speaking about racism and inequality, we say, well, what about Black on Black crime?
What about it though? Yeah, it exists.
That is a separate issue. We will get to that. There are issues in every community, but we're not talking about that, right? Again, a cop-out. Again, it makes me feel uncomfortable, so I don't want to talk about it. So things like, what about Black on Black crime? Oh, you're putting the race card, victimhood, cop-out. I don't want to hear that right now. We are talking about years and years of systemic racism. Let's start there. We'll deal with the issues in the Black community, like there are issues in the white community. Yeah. Statistics about stop and search, about I was reading that Black men in particular are more likely to be imprisoned or received harsher sentences for drug possession or something like that, and are statistically lower or fewer Black people actually take drugs and things like that. It's just statistics, information. Let's not be blinded, and let's not be willfully ignorant. Let's stop that. If we are serious about being anti-racist, let's be honest, because it starts from a place of honesty. If you're not willing to be honest, then really, I made a decision during all of this to stop talking to people that just want to be willfully ignorant. I'm not going to waste my breath. I'm not going to explain to you why we say Black Lives Matter as opposed to All Lives Matter. I'm not going to explain white privilege anymore, though we spoke about on here, and I'm glad we did. But there are some things I'm just not going to do anymore, because I think you just don't want to talk about it. And that, it is what it is.
And also, right, as a Black person, it doesn't make you an expert on Black history or Black issues. Like, you're an expert on your story and your experience, of course, but it's not like, oh, I want to educate myself. I'm going to go to my Black friend for them to tell me everything that I need to know. It's everything. Like,
that's it.
I'm not an expert on gender, equality over whatever oppression over the past century. Right? I haven't studied it in depth. I can tell you my experience, my story, but I'm not your go-to expert.
And that's what it said when we started, that white people can be seen as an individual, but the minute you start to especially talk about race, you talk to a Black person, they all of a sudden become the representative of the whole Black race. And it's like
Africa as well.
Right. It's just like, come on, let's just stop this. Let's start from a place of honesty, and let's place of a place of, if we're serious about this, about being an ally and being actively anti-racist, and we can start moving forward, because that's really what everybody wants. I said, it's not a Black versus white issue, it's everyone against racism.
So Astrid's said here, it's not about statistics or proving anything, it's about taking action. So starting small in your area of influence. Yeah, and I think, myself and Simone were mentioning that earlier about, your circle of influence, of like what you can do from the big to the small moments, right? But
exactly, that's what we said. No, completely. Sure. Yeah, that's what we said, Astrid, definitely. We use those words about sphere of influence. I am a big person about action, not just words. I'm doing what I can do in my area of influence. I think that everybody should be doing it. And that's what my whole message through speaking to you, Laura, is about: action. What action are we all taking? That's everybody.
I just kind of want to to highlight one last point that you mentioned a lot about being allies, right? This isn't a Black people's issue. This is like a human race issue. This is a global issue for everyone to get involved with. And if there is any white person, and I'm going to talk to the women specifically, still kind of unsure about that, thinking, but what am I really supposed to do? Just think about the whole feminist movement, right? And everyone's like, doing their part, posting posts all the time about gender equality and women empowering women and all this kind of stuff. But what are we really seeking is also the support of male allies, because men are the ones in power still predominantly. And so we need men's influence to create change.
Yeah.
The same exists here with race, right? So if white people are predominantly the ones in power still within the UK, say within America, then we also have a responsibility and our part to play in creating the change.
Yeah.
Because just like it would infuriate me if a man said, well, this isn't my issue, this is all you to figure out. The same is said with race.
Yeah, completely agree.
Right. That's so if I can try and relate if anyone's still kind of like, how can I, just figure that one out for yourself, because we all have a part to play in this.
Yeah.
Just kind of exactly. Simone, thank you so much for your time, right? I really appreciate your kind of honesty on this conversation, and I apologize for all the technical disruptions, but appreciate your patience and flexibility with all of it. Do you have any kind of final messages for people listening, for people tuning in? You've shared so much already, I know, but...
Yeah, no, like I said, I sound like a broken record, but it's not a Black versus white issue. It's us against racism. What can we all do where we are? What can you do where you are? What can I do where I am? And let's start making changes where we are to move forward to a better society. If not in my lifetime, I pray my daughter, my children's children.
Can we aim for your lifetime? You're not old, like Jesus.
I don't know.
No.
We exactly. We just want change and move forward. I'm aware that it's not going to happen overnight, but if we can move forward and if we can all make changes and take action, then hopefully we'll see some really positive change.
Yeah, but look at all the progress that has been made since George Floyd's death, and the power of people protesting, and the fact that politicians are just reactive to everything. So when they see people standing up and being so adamant for change, like, things do begin to change. So we are still going to say in our lifetime.
Yeah, in our lifetime, exactly. Let me be try and be hopeful that in our lifetime, and even that peace, the protests and everything. Somebody said there's a difference between protesters, rioters, and looters. There's a difference, and I'm going to leave that there. Just look that up, and even when we're talking about media and how many media can manipulate things, just be aware of that as well, because the majority of these are peaceful protests. People have had enough, and this is the response.
It's true. It's the straw that broke the camel's back. And this is what we're seeing playing out right now. It's not just one incident, it's centuries being reflected. Thank you so much, Simone, for coming on and sharing your story and your thoughts and your views. It was so beautiful to have you on here today. And I really appreciate it. And I know people listening have found this very insightful. I can see from the comments as well. So.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you so much for having me, Laura. Thank you for everyone that's listening, watching. Let's just all work together. Much love to everybody.
Keep the conversation going, for sure. As you said, not just a hashtag blip.
That's it. Definitely.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Okay. Enjoy your evening, and we'll talk to everyone again soon.
Okay. Take care. See you.
Bye.
Bye.